I want you to try something. Wherever you are right now, take a deep breath. Feel the air fill your lungs. Feel the empty space around you. Now, imagine that space is gone. Imagine you are lying on your stomach. About you is a solid ceiling of cold, jagged limestone pressing directly against your spine. Below you is solid rock. On your left and right, the walls are so tight they are crushing your shoulders. You cannot lift your head. You cannot turn around. You can only exhale, push yourself forward an inch in the pitch black, and hope the tunnel doesn't get any smaller. If reading that made your chest feel tight, you might want to click away right now. Because where we are going tonight, there is no turning back. Welcome to Prince of Darkness. We fear the vastness of space. We fear the depths of the ocean. But beneath our feet lies a completely alien world that we practically ignore. A massive, unmapped network of subterranean veins. Total, absolute darkness, completely cut off from the rules of the surface. Tonight, we are unsealing the highly classified expedition logs of Project Echo, a private, deeply funded attempt to map the deepest, unexplored cave system in the Appalachian Mountains. This is not a story about amateur hikers making a mistake. This is a documented account of two hardened elite professionals who went looking for the bottom of the world and found out that the earth beneath us is not dead. It is waiting. If you think you have the stomach for it, stay with me. But do not say, I didn't warn you. To survive deep cave exploration, or caving as the professionals call it, you cannot afford to have a normal human mind. You need the psychological endurance of a combat veteran and the physical stamina of an elite athlete. Carter and Vance possessed both. They were former military engineers, men who had spent their lives dealing in extreme pressure, calculated risks, and absolute physical limits. When they left the service, they turned their obsession toward the underground. They became the men that private organizations called when they needed an unmapped, highly dangerous subterranean system evaluated. They were stoic, disciplined, and unfazed by the dark. They had crawled through mud-choked tunnels in Mexico and mapped underwater sinkholes in Belize. They believed there was no geological anomaly they could not conquer. In November 2022, they accepted a contract to map System 41, a newly discovered entrance deep in a restricted zone of the Appalachian Range. Preliminary sonar scans from the surface showed a massive, hollow anomaly going down deeper than any known cave in the continent. Their mission was simple: descend, map the primary chambers, place geographical markers, and extract. It was scheduled to take exactly 72 hours. The logs recovered from their digital recorders tell a very different story. The expedition began smoothly. Carter, the lead navigator, documented the initial descent. Hour 1, Carter's voice logs state. The entrance is a vertical drop, roughly 200 feet, rappelling down into the throat. The temperature is dropping rapidly. Normal limestone composition. Vance is directly above me. We are dropping out of the light. Once they reached the bottom of the vertical shaft, they detached their ropes and turned on their high-powered helmet lamps. The light carved a narrow tunnel through absolute crushing blackness. The silence of a deep cave is unnatural. On the surface, there's always background noise, wind, traffic, birds. Underground, the silence is so heavy it actually creates a ringing pressure in your ears. The only sound is the rhythmic dripping of water and the heavy sound of your own heartbeat. For the first 10 hours, Carter and Vance made excellent progress. They mapped 3 large cathedral-like chambers, dropping chemical glow markers to establish a breadcrumb trail back to the surface. But at hour 14, they encountered the obstacle. In professional caving, it is known as a squeeze, a point where the cave narrows so drastically that explorers must physically contort their bodies to pass. This squeeze was uniquely brutal. It was a horizontal fissure barely 18 inches high, stretching out into the dark for over 40 yards. "We are at a bottleneck," Vance recorded on the audio log. His voice was calm, analytical. "The ceiling is pressing hard. We have to push our gear bags ahead of us. We are going to have to exhale completely to flatten our rib cages just to slide through. Carter is going first. I am right behind him." If you have never been in a cave, you cannot understand the sheer, paralyzing panic of a tight squeeze. You are wedged between millions of tons of solid rock. If you get stuck, there is no heavy machinery that can reach you. You will simply stay there, locked in stone, until you die. But Carter and Vance didn't panic. They went into the crack. The journey through the squeeze took them 2 agonizing hours. 2 hours of pushing with their toes, scraping their shoulders against jagged rock, breathing in shallow gasps to keep their chests flat. When Carter finally popped out the other side, followed closely by Vance, they found themselves standing in a massive, open cavern. Their helmet lights couldn't even reach the ceiling. They sat on the wet stone, exhausted, drinking from their canteens. They had officially crossed into uncharted territory. "We made it through," Carter logged. "We are in a massive secondary chamber, setting down marker beacon number 4. The air quality here is strange." That was the first indication that something was fundamentally wrong with System 41. In a standard cave, the deeper you go, the warmer it gets due to geothermal heat, and the more stagnant the air becomes. But as Vance checked his atmospheric meters, he noticed something impossible. "The temperature is dropping," Vance said on the recording, the sound of his heavy boots echoing off the massive walls. "It's near freezing. And there is a draft, a strong one. It's hitting us right in the face." A draft deep underground means only one thing: an exit or an impossibly massive hollow space pushing air around. But the direction of the wind didn't make sense. It wasn't constant. It was rhythmic. It would blow a cold, freezing mist into their faces for about 6 seconds. Then it would completely stop. 10 seconds of dead silence, and then a slow, pulling vacuum of air moving back the other way. "Carter," Vance's voice was captured on the audio lock, sounding tense for the first time. "Do you feel that? The air pressure. It's cycling." There is a terrifying moment on the recovered audio file. The microphone picks up the absolute silence of the cave, and then a deep, incredibly low-frequency vibration. It is so low it sounds less like a noise and more like a physical tremor in the earth. Whoosh! A 6-second rush of cold air. Silence. It was the exact rhythm of a lung. The cave was inhaling and exhaling. Most men would have turned back. Most men would have squeezed back through that 40-yard nightmare of rock and sprinted for the surface ropes. But Carter and Vance were professionals. They were paid to map the anomaly. "We have a massive atmospheric fluctuation," Carter logged, his voice tight but controlled. "We are going to follow the draft. We need to find the source of the pressure." They left their 4th marker beacon glowing a bright neon green in the dark and walked deeper into the blackness, heading directly toward the source of the breathing. They didn't realize that they had just crossed a threshold. They were no longer walking through a geological formation. They were walking into an anatomy. If you were watching this, sitting in a comfortable chair in a lit room, you might be thinking, why didn't they just turn around? That is the logic of the surface world. Down there, in the absolute dark, adrenaline and obsession take over. Carter and Vance were not wired to retreat from an undiscovered anomaly. They were wired to conquer it. They pushed deeper into the cavern, walking for what felt like hours. The beam of their helmet lights cut through the freezing mist generated by the rhythmic, breathing draft. But as they walked, the physical structure of the cave began to change. Natural caves are chaotic. They're formed by millions of years of water erosion and tectonic shifts. They are jagged, uneven, and unpredictable. Audio log, hour 22. Vance's voice crackled on the recorder. He was breathing heavily, the physical toll of the depth starting to show. The composition of the rock is altering. It is no longer limestone. It is dark, almost completely black, and it is smooth. Carter's camera footage from this point is deeply unsettling. He pans his helmet light across the walls of the tunnel. The stone is perfectly polished. It reflects their lights like a massive black mirror. There are no jagged edges, no stalactites. It looked less like a geological formation and more like the inside of a massive fossilized artery. "The draft is getting stronger," Carter said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The cycle is speeding up. It's inhaling every 4 seconds now." Then, the technology started to die. In elite subterranean exploration, your instruments are your eyes. Without them, you are entirely blind. Vance pulled out his digital topographic mapper to log the smooth tunnel. The screen flickered, pulsed with static, and then displayed a topographical error that made Vance stop dead in his tracks. "Carter, stop." Vance's voice was completely stripped of his usual military calm. "What is it?" "The depth gauge. It's malfunctioning." Carter turned back, his light hitting Vance's pale face. "What does it read?" "According to the barometric pressure and the localized GPS ping we dropped at the entrance, we are currently 3 miles below sea level. That is impossible. The Earth's crust in this sector shouldn't support an open cavern at this depth. The pressure should have crushed this tunnel millions of years ago, and the temperature should be boiling. Instead, it was freezing. Their breath plumed in the air in thick, white clouds. "Look at your compass," Vance ordered. Carter pulled his heavy military compass from his tactical vest. The analog needle wasn't just spinning, it was violently twitching, vibrating so hard it was scratching the glass face. The magnetic field of the Earth was completely warped. They were stripped of their navigation. They were 3 miles deep, and the tunnel was getting narrower. "We are calling it," Carter logged, making the hardest decision a lead navigator can make. "The environment is completely unstable. Equipment failure across the board. We are terminating the expedition. We are heading back to Marker Beacon 4, back through the squeeze and extracting." They turned around. They began the long, silent walk back up the smooth, black tunnel. But the underground does not obey the rules of time and distance. They walked for 3 hours. They should have reached the massive cavern and the neon green glow of their 4th marker beacon within 45 minutes, but the tunnel just kept going. Are you still with me? Are you paying attention? Because this is the moment where human logic shatters. Imagine walking down a hallway in your own house, and suddenly the hallway stretches on for miles. The door behind you is gone. The door in front of you never gets closer. That is what Carter and Vance experienced. Audio log. "I don't know the time." Carter's voice was ragged, laced with a creeping primal panic. "My watch has stopped. The digital recorders are losing battery. We have been walking back the exact way we came. The tunnel hasn't changed, but we haven't found the marker." They stopped walking. The crushing weight of their situation settled over them. They were lost in a straight line. Then, the breathing stopped. The rhythmic, freezing draft that had been blowing past them for hours suddenly ceased. The dead, oppressive silence of the cave slammed back into their eardrums. Vance raised his flashlight, illuminating the tunnel ahead. "Carter," Vance whispered. His voice was trembling. An elite, hardened military engineer was trembling. "Look at the walls." Carter panned his light. The perfectly smooth, black mirror-like stone of the tunnel was changing. It was physically contracting. The walls were silently moving inward. The ceiling was lowering. The earth wasn't just breathing anymore. It was swallowing. If you suffer from claustrophobia, look away from the screen right now. Just listen to the sound of my voice, because what Carter and Vance had to do next is the definition of a living nightmare. The tunnel was shrinking rapidly. What was once a 10-foot wide corridor was now barely 4 feet wide, and it was still closing. They had no choice. They had to run. They sprinted through the dark, their heavy boots slamming against the stone, their breathing ragged and loud in the tightening space. They abandoned their heavy gear bags, dropping thousands of dollars of mapping equipment, carrying only their emergency oxygen and their lights. The ceiling dropped lower. They had to crouch. Then they had to crawl. "Keep moving!" Carter screamed, the military discipline entirely replaced by the raw animal instinct to survive. "Don't stop!" The walls pressed against their shoulders, the ceiling scraped against their helmets. Finally, the tunnel violently, abruptly ended. They hit a solid wall of rock, but at the bottom of the wall, illuminated by their dying helmet lights, was a fissure, a horizontal crack barely 15 inches high. It was a squeeze, but it wasn't the squeeze they had come through hours ago. This rock was wet, dark, and organic-looking. Behind them, the smooth black walls of the tunnel were audibly grinding together, closing the space they had just crawled through. They were being pushed into the crack like a hydraulic press. "We have to go in!" Vance yelled, his voice echoing in the tiny space. "It's going to crush us!" Carter didn't hesitate. He dropped to his stomach, turned his face sideways to fit, and pushed himself into the 15-inch crack. Vance scrambled right behind him. The moment Vance's boots cleared the opening, the tunnel behind them sealed shut with a deafening, thunderous crack of solid stone grinding against stone. The vibration shook the dust from the ceiling directly into their eyes. They were in the squeeze. It was tighter than anything they had ever trained for. The rock pressed directly against Carter's chest and back. He could not expand his lungs fully. Every breath was a shallow, agonizing gasp. "Carter, are you okay?" Carter croaked, his face pressed flat against the cold, wet stone. "Vance, I'm stuck!" Vance's voice came from the dark behind him. It wasn't loud. It was a terrifying, hollow whisper. "Carter, my chest is wedged. I can't exhale enough to move." In professional caving, this is the worst-case scenario. If the man behind you gets stuck in a tight squeeze, neither of you can go back. And if you are the man in front, you cannot turn around to help him. "Calm down," Carter said, trying to force his heart rate down. "Military breathing, Vance. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out. Flatten your ribs. You can do this." "The rock," Vance gasped. "Carter, the rock is warm." Carter stopped pushing forward. He pressed his bare cheek against the floor of the fissure. Vance was right. The freezing temperature of the cave was gone. The stone was uncomfortably warm. It felt like the skin of a living animal. And then, the space got smaller. It wasn't an illusion. The 15-inch gap was contracting. The ceiling was lowering by millimeters. "It's moving!" Vance screamed, pure terror finally breaking his mind. "The ceiling is moving! Carter, it's crushing my spine!" "Push!" Carter roared, digging his fingers into the smooth stone, dragging his body forward with pure, brutal strength. "Tear your clothes, tear your skin, just push." Behind him, Vance began to thrash violently. In a space that tight, thrashing is a death sentence. It expands the muscles and wedges the body tighter. "I can't!" Vance shrieked, the sound echoing horribly in the confined space. "Something has my legs! Carter, something is pulling me back!" Carter stopped. He couldn't turn his head. He could only stare into the blackness ahead of him. "Vance, hold on!" "It's soft!" Vance screamed, his voice dissolving into a wet, agonizing gurgle. "The rock is soft! It's pulling me in!" And then, the most terrifying sound Carter had ever heard in his life filled the tiny fissure. It was the sound of human bones snapping under immense, impossible pressure. Vance's screams were cut off instantly. Dead silence returned to the cave. Carter lay in the dark, wedged in the 15-inch crack, listening to the sound of something wet and heavy shifting in the dark behind him, where his partner used to be. If you have made it this far into the video, you are experiencing a fraction of the psychological weight that Carter felt in that 15-inch crack. But you can pause this. You can stand up and walk outside. Carter could not. Carter was a highly decorated military engineer. He was trained to compartmentalize trauma. When Vance's screams were abruptly cut off, Carter did the only thing his training allowed him to do. He shut down his emotions completely. He became a machine programmed for a single objective: forward movement. But the environment was no longer static. "Audio log," Carter whispered. The sound of his own voice was muffled by the suffocating tightness of the rock. "Vance is gone. The structural integrity of the fissure is compromised. The walls are pulsing." It wasn't an earthquake. It was a biological rhythm. The warm, smooth stone pressing against Carter's chest and spine was expanding and contracting in slow, rhythmic waves. In medical terms, it is called peristalsis, the involuntary constriction and relaxation of muscles, creating wave-like movements that push contents forward within a digestive tract. The earth was swallowing him. Carter's primary helmet light flickered and died. He was plunged into absolute, impenetrable darkness. He was 3 miles underground, wedged in a living tunnel, completely blind. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford in the deep dark. Carter pulled his emergency chemical glow stick from his vest, snapped it, and held it in his teeth. It cast a weak, sickly green light just inches in front of his face. For 6 agonizing hours, Carter crawled. He timed his movements with the pulsing of the walls. When the tunnel expanded, he dragged himself forward. When it contracted, he exhaled completely and let the immense pressure hold him in place. His tactical uniform was shredded, his skin was raw and bleeding. The air was growing thick, heavy, and nauseatingly sweet, the smell of ancient, stagnant biology. Suddenly, the pressure against his shoulders vanished. The floor beneath him gave way. Carter fell. He plummeted about 15 feet, crashing violently into a pool of warm, thick liquid. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he scrambled to his feet, splashing in the knee-deep fluid, holding his glowing green chemlight high. He had made it out of the squeeze. He was in a new cavern. But as the green light pushed back the darkness, Carter realized the horrific truth of System 41. Carter stood completely frozen in the knee-deep liquid. He slowly panned the chemical light around the space. It wasn't a limestone cavern. There were no stalactites. There were no jagged rocks. The walls were entirely composed of thick, dark red ribbed tissue coated in a layer of translucent, highly acidic mucus. The ceiling, 50 feet above him, was slowly expanding and contracting with that same deep, low-frequency vibration they had heard hours ago. The breathing of the earth. Final audio log. Carter's voice was completely flat. The voice of a man whose mind has finally, irreversibly snapped. I have reached the bottom of the anomaly. It is not a geological formation. We did not discover a cave system. We walked into the mouth of an apex predator. Carter waded through the warm, acidic fluid. His boots bumped into something submerged in the pool. He reached down and pulled it up into the green light. It was Vance's heavy tactical backpack. The thick, military-grade nylon was partially dissolved, eaten away by the digestive acids of the chamber. There was no sign of Vance's body. The system had already consumed him. At the far end of the biological cavern, Carter heard the sound of rushing water. A massive, high-pressure underground river flowing through a dark, smooth valve in the wall. Carter knew he was never going to see the sun again. The cavern was already beginning to seal itself. The walls were slowly closing in. The digestion cycle was starting. But military discipline is absolute. If you cannot survive, you ensure your intelligence reaches the surface. Carter took his waterproof digital audio recorder. He placed it inside a heavy-duty pressurized buoyancy capsule from his survival kit. He sealed it tight. To whoever finds this, Carter spoke into the recorder one last time, his voice echoing off the ribbed, fleshy walls. The deep earth is not dead. It is sleeping, and we are waking it up. Do not send a rescue team. Seal the entrance. Bomb it. Do not let anyone else come down here. He threw the waterproof capsule into the rushing underground river. The recording captures the sound of the capsule hitting the water. And then, for the last 10 seconds of the audio file, the microphone picks up a deafening, terrifying roar. Not an animal roar. The sound of thousands of tons of organic tissue shifting, contracting, and crushing everything inside the chamber. Then, the audio cuts to static. 3 months later, a group of amateur geologists exploring a shallow, sunlit river cave 30 miles away from the restricted zone found the yellow buoyancy capsule washed up on a gravel bank. The audio files were extracted. The government immediately classified the area, labeling it a toxic geological hazard zone. The entrance to System 41 was filled with 3,000 tons of concrete. But the concrete won't stop it. You cannot cage an anatomy that is the size of a mountain. You made it to the end. You didn't click away. But now the claustrophobia is going to stay with you. We walk across the grass, we pave our roads, we build our cities, and we falsely believe that the ground beneath our feet is solid, dead rock. But the next time you feel a tremor in the earth, the next time you feel a sudden, cold draft coming from a dark basement or an open storm drain, ask yourself, is it just the wind? Or is the earth taking a breath? If this classified dive into the subterranean abyss made your heart race, you are officially part of the elite. Hit that like button right now to feed the algorithm and prove you survived the descent. If you want to uncover the darkest, most terrifying secrets hidden on this planet, subscribe to Prince of Darkness. We go where others are too afraid to look. What is your biggest fear? The deep ocean? The infinite space? Or being buried alive in the absolute dark? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, stay in the light and never, ever go exploring underground. Good night.